Yo, what's up? Diet Sugar here with another long form video for y'all today. Today, we're going to talk more about authenticity, some of the practical ways you can lean into that, as well as a couple of techniques for curating really powerful references for your own tastes. This episode is really all about the power of embracing your own influences, and I'm probably going to title it something like, "Fuck originality, you're a thief." Anyways, let's dive in. Let's talk about the differences between originality and authenticity. And specifically, let's talk about why originality isn't really what you should strive for as a creative, in my opinion. Before we get into that, just a quick plug. If you're more interested in reading this kind of content, there is a newsletter that goes out. It goes out a couple weeks earlier than the videos themselves drop. It's also a good way to stay up to date with all the other stuff that I've got going on. If you're new here and you enjoy the video, consider leaving a comment, liking the video, subscribing to the channel, checking out my other videos. There's a lot of other stuff on this channel. And also you can find my Instagram and my Twitter, all that stuff in links below. Today's episode is all about being true to yourself, to your own tastes. And before we dig any deeper into that, let's connect the last episode to this episode. So last episode, what we talked about were some of the benefits of embracing authenticity. I kind of hinted a little bit at this episode, and some of those benefits are you'll find your work is more fulfilling. You'll find it represents more of what you want it to represent when you lean into authenticity, rather than doing something like following a trend that you don't really buy into. We also talked about how leaning into authenticity as a creative makes it the most marketable version of the brand, because it's just genuine, it's authentic, it's gonna resonate with more people. Something that I hinted at last week was this episode, the difference between originality and authenticity. Specifically, I wanted to talk about the trap of originality. I think originality is a sort of a twisted sister to perfection as a creator. And perfection is the enemy of progress, in my opinion, as a creative. The more that you strive for perfection, the less you actually get done. And to make better work, you need to complete more work. You need to finish things more often. You need to finish things faster so that you can do more of it in your life. And I think the desire to be original, as it has shown up in my own life from time to time, is probably the one thing that makes me want to rebel against my own tastes, which is kind of stupid to do that, because when you do that, you make things that you don't enjoy. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is originality. And let's talk about specifically rejecting originality as a creative. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but hear me out. So originality is so much of a trap in music production that this is a hotly debated subject where people talk about, I don't want to use presets in my work. I don't want to use samples in my work. Or if an artist that they enjoy, if they find out that they use presets, they're like, oh, I can't believe it. I don't know if I can listen to this person anymore. And it's like, I don't understand that at all. Presets help you get work done faster. Just because you start with something doesn't mean that that's how you're going to finish it. Like, I use a preset in 90% of the sounds that I make. I start with the preset and then I manipulate the shit out of it so that it's something totally different. But I find a sound that's already 80% of what I want, because otherwise I'm just wasting my time. And it's not like I can't design the sound myself, it's just faster. Being able to do that faster allows me to focus more on the things that are actually the tweaks that matter. The last little 20% of what I need to do is actually going to be 80% of my quote unquote aesthetic as a creative. And so I think if you desire to see yourself stagnate as a creative, strive to be original. Take the time to do every little thing. Take the time to create every preset, every sound from scratch. It's going to take you forever, and by the end of it, you may not be super happy with what you've made, because the people that make those presets, the people that make samples, they spend a lot of time on those things. So they're good at it. Like, when you first start doing this stuff, you're going to suck at whatever it is you're doing. If you're writing, if you're making art, if you're making music, you're gonna suck at first. You just are, because you need the repetition and the practice to be good. You may have natural talent, but it's not gonna match your taste yet, more than likely. Point being, if you would prefer to see your growth as a creative move more quickly, then what I think you should do is you should strive to be authentic. You should reject originality early on, and you should say, I want to be authentic. I want to study what actually made made me want to get into this creative space and pull all of those things together, and the amalgamation of that is now my aesthetic, because that's going to be true to you. It's going to resonate. You know, you should try to understand your favorite creators and why they resonate with you, because if you can do that, you can get in touch with a deeper part of yourself. And that's what I mean by being authentic. This is kind of where the sauce gets thick, because I have a lot of musical influences. I grew up listening to like Motown, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Led Zeppelin, all kinds of shit. And then I listened to metal for a while. I learned to play metal guitar, got super into dubstep, gave myself tinnitus by just going to dubstep concerts without earplugs, and then got super into electronic stuff. And throughout all of that, I was just always, you know, grooving to hip hop, because I grew up listening to Motown, and that's like the foundation for that music. So my musical tastes are all over, all over the fucking canvas. Like, it's like somebody took a Jackson Pollock approach and was just like, yeah, here you go, just fucking whatever. And on top of all that, I love classical music. I've always loved classical music. That's what got me into making music, because I fucking wanted to play Mozart and Beethoven on a piano that would teach me how to do that stuff. And anyways, all of that is so separated between era, genre, you know, timbres of music, instruments used, feelings, vibes, whatever. But I don't really reject any of it. I kind of prefer the approach of studying all of it. And what I mean by this is that I can't exactly take like a Motown song and turn that into a 21 Savage beat just by looking at the arrangement. But what does work is to reference the decisions, to reference, okay, they took out a kick drum here. That seems like a useful technique. And then they brought in a high-end instrument here. That seems like another useful technique. And when they combined those two for the second half, it got even bigger. So I'm gonna do the same thing in my production. Now I can take those decisions with me in whatever I'm making. The same with classical music. You know, classical music is like, in my opinion, the epitome of tension and release. Like, it's done so well because they had to. They didn't have production tricks back then. They had an orchestra. They had people playing stuff, you know, playing instruments. And on top of that, I keep all of those, my favorite songs throughout my life, you know, even when I don't remember them. When one comes to me, I add it to a playlist. That music means something to me. And so when I'm feeling stuck on something, I just go listen to a random song on that playlist just to refresh my ears and to reset, like, okay, this is what I enjoy about life, is music. And if I need to move forward on something, if I need a reference, I'll curate that playlist first before looking elsewhere, just to see, like, can I get a decision from somebody so that I can know what decision I want to make that's going to resonate most, you know, tightly with me. And what's cool about this technique is that you can apply it to any sort of creative approach, any sort of creative outlet, any sort of creative work. You can do this as a painter. You can do this as a graphic designer. You can do this as a video editor. You can do this as a filmmaker, as a director, whatever. If you take the time to just lean into yourself, lean into the desire of that was there to begin with, really made you want to do whatever it is that you're doing, and you stop questioning your fucking, like, decisions, and you stop trying to be so damn original to save your ego from feeling like you're not original, you're gonna be more original, ironically enough. That's my take on it. That's why I think you should reject originality. That's kind of like tying a bow on the thoughts that I had last week. The gem that I'll use to wrap up this section is that embracing authenticity is the quickest way, in my opinion, to discover who you are as a creative. You should just study the things that you like treat it like any other subject that you wanted to learn. You're trying to learn more about yourself. Let's talk about what it means to do that. Let's talk about more of the practical tips, like I said I would talk about in this episode. You know, I've mentioned this a few times, but understanding your influences is one of the core pieces of understanding what it means to be authentic to yourself. And I'll kick this section off by saying authenticity is key. I'll use an example. One of my favorite producers is Flume. I mentioned this in the last episode. My music, sometimes, a lot of the times actually, will have some inspiration, influence from him and from his work. If you compare the music side by side, it's obviously not the same person making the music. There's a reason for that. It's because we're different people. We have different influences. We make different decisions. But something that I did early on when I started learning how to produce music was I studied Flume's songs more like intently, more scholarly, if you will, with the desire to actually learn from them rather than to just enjoy them. And not only to learn from his decisions, but to learn from the engineer's decisions that mix his music, to learn from the artist's decisions that hop on his tracks and add vocals, or that write the songs with him. And all that to say, you know, at a certain point, it is easy enough to copy something from one of your favorite artists' tracks. You see this kind of stuff on YouTube all the time. Somebody will remake a Flume song, for example. A lot of the times, once you get to a certain level of skill in what you're doing, you can do that. And it's a great way to learn. I'm suggesting that you try to do that earlier than when your technical ability gets there. Because if you do that, you're going to be studying decisions more than you're going to be studying techniques. That's knowledge that you can carry with you forward over and over and over again. So for example, I've studied his composition, I've studied his arrangement, I've studied when he chooses to layer stuff, I've studied the drum patterns, I've studied the drum sound selection, I've studied the fucking climax and energy peaks of an entire album. All of that stuff is really useful to me because I want to make music, and I do make music. And in fact, I'll take it even further and I'll say I've not only studied those things, I've stolen a lot of them. I litter them throughout my own work. I use a lot of the same detuned sounds that you'll hear in a Flume sound because I fucking love those sounds. I'll use a lot of the same kick patterns because they work really well. They're simple, they leave a lot of room for an artist. And I'm trying to make beats that artists want to sing on and rap on, so they need space. I've stolen most of the ambience and stuff from his productions because his productions are super ambient. And that's probably half him and half the mixing engineer. So that's kind of like, you know, that's why it sounds different every album, but that's a blend of two people's decisions that I'm sort of taking as my own. And there's a book that is called Still Like an Artist, which if you haven't read it, it's a great book to read. It's super easy to read, it's real quick. But there's a quote in it that says, everything is a remix. And that should be fucking empowering as an artist, as a creator, because you don't have to come up with an idea every time you want to make something. Most of the ideas are already there. They're already floating around in the world. It's your job to synthesize something new out of them. I'll give you 2 gems actually for this section. Make a list of your influences and study them. Take the time to actually study them. Study the composition, the arrangement, the sound selection. Make a list of those things and then go study your influences, the references that you choose to pull from them. Study those things and take notes, however it is you do that, and learn from them. The second gem is to curate powerful pieces. That's how you start to develop your own aesthetic. That's how you start to develop your own sound, your own vibe. And that is often something that is so difficult to wrap our minds around, of like, how do we actually do that? You do it by making decisions about what you're going to include in your own work and what you're not going to include. And you need to have, in my opinion, references to inform that stuff. Otherwise, you're just going to be guessing a bunch of the times, and that's going to take you so fucking long. And that's speaking from personal experience. So let's break those 2 gems down. When I say make a list of your influences and study them, this is what I'm talking about. Quite literally asking yourself, my influences are question mark, and then write them down. And when you're done with that, decide if there's any of them that you want to cut from the list, and cut them. And another way to think of your influences are, who do I think has good taste? Whose work makes me feel like it's delectable? Write those people down. Write those creators down. Keep that list for yourself, because you can go back to it when you feel stuck on something. And then the second list that I think you should make, artists and creators, whatever, that have shaped your most recent work. This could just be people you've collaborated with, because what you're looking for is overlaps in style, aesthetic. You're looking more for patterns of the work that's created from the people that you're choosing to either have influenced your recent stuff or just throughout your life have influenced you. And if you struggle with this, then try an unorthodox approach. And what I mean by this is try it with something totally different. So what I would suggest doing is making a third list, even if you don't struggle with this, and asking yourself the question of, what kind of foods do I like? Do you like spicy foods? Do you like bland foods? Do you like stuff that's bold and when it's presented to you it's very colorful? Or do you like stuff that's kind of plain and simple? Do you like stuff to be complex? Do you like stuff to be overly sweet? What is it? And just like write that stuff down. Try to understand a little bit about yourself. I like really spicy foods. I like sweet foods. I have a gigantic sweet tooth. That's why I named myself Diet Sugar. It's one of the reasons anyways. And the other reason that I mentioned spicy foods is that I tend to make my sounds a little crispy, a little hot. You know, I like them to be hot and spicy. I don't like them to be kind of like far away from you. I want that shit right in your face. Like, I want it to be a spicy track when I make a track, just because I like spicy stuff. I think it's more interesting. So let's talk about the second gem now. Let's talk about curating powerful moments. So once you've taken the time to study those people that you've written down, you know, you've studied decisions, you've studied aesthetic, you've studied whatever it is you're struggling with, and you try to reference that, and you've also added on unorthodox sources like chefs, foods, you know, whatever, TV shows. Then what I would suggest doing is for each of those, we'll call them your taste makers. For each of your taste makers, curate things that you like from their catalogs for the most powerful pieces. And I don't mean the most popular pieces. I mean the things that make you feel a certain way, the things that make you resonate most deeply. Once you do that, put them all into a favorites playlist. Put them all into a favorite foods, you know, recipe book, whatever. Because all of those things are incredibly unique to you. Whatever it is that you've curated in that list and you've decided to save for yourself for later, those are your unique set of inspirations. It's really easy at that point to define your sound, to define your aesthetic, because you can just say what patterns start to show up when I look at all this stuff together. Did every artist that I pick, their favorite, you know, my favorite song, does it make me feel red? Does it make me feel blue? You know, like whatever. Just think creatively and try to solve that problem now that you have a little bit of direction to help you solve that problem. I think you'll get through it a lot faster. And when you're done with that, and let's say you've curated your sound, now you have direction. Now go find sounds that match that sort of aesthetic of sounds. Go find loose kicks. If every person that you listen to, every artist that you listen to, their kicks are big and boomy, don't use any other kicks in your music, because guess what? You already know that you like big and boomy kicks. Why rebel from that taste? That's the whole point that I'm trying to make, is that if you can understand those tastes, you don't need to rebel against them. You don't have to guess anymore. It's like it's presented to you in a way that's very clear that that's what you like. And if at the end of the exercise it's all over the wall and it's just crazy, then just fucking experiment and just have fun. Like, just have fun creating and just blend shit together. There's nothing wrong with that. No one tells you that you can't do that except for yourself. I think if you try this out, you'll be surprised. You'll have something special at the end of it that you can take with you throughout your creative journey. And if you thought that was a useful tip, subscribe to the channel. There's this book that I'm reading called Big Magic: Creative Living Beyond Fear. And it's kind of cheesy at times, but there are some frosty nugs of wisdom in it. And there's a line in the book that really stuck out to me, and I'm going to present this to you as a gem, because I think that's what it is. You have to learn to imitate before you can learn to innovate. And I'm paraphrasing it, but that got me thinking that being a creative, your aesthetic is everything. It really is. And I've definitely struggled from time to time, most of the time actually, I've struggled with making content. The more that I've allowed myself to be creative and I've sort of given myself permission to be creative and actually solve this fucking problem of aesthetic, the more that it's easy. In doing that and studying my references and studying my influences and really starting to learn more about myself, that's given me power as a creative. That's given me direction to follow. And that's really what I'm trying to connect the dots for you of why this is so valuable with regards to content. You don't have to add on a ton of other decisions, basically. It's really simple. You just find a few content creators that you really like and you go, cool, I've got references now. They all seem to use like glitchy effects and stuff. I'm gonna use glitchy effects in my transitions. I really like those. You know, it could be as simple as that. I'm not saying that about myself. Like, I'm obviously experimenting with video editing. That's why all these damn videos look different every time. Part of that is just my desire to be curious and learn shit. Anyways, the point being, the more that you do this, the more that you lean into your references and you lean into your inspirations, the more authentic you're gonna be, the easier it's gonna be to curate an aesthetic and create a vibe for yourself, which is gonna make making content much easier, because guess what? All you gotta do is go find some assets that you really, really resonate with. And a lot of times you can find free ones. And then make yourself some templates to make your own content with. Like, just take the time to learn that stuff. It's valuable. And it doesn't make you any less original to buy a preset or a template of something from a creator that you really like what they're doing. You're just skipping some of the like boring work that exists. You're still gonna get to go tweak the template and turn it into your whatever it is, you know, that's unique to you. And if you have resistance resistance to that. It's more than likely fear speaking, and you should recognize that and pause and then move past it. Like, you don't need to let fear control your creative decisions. So if you ever feel like you're stuck in a creative block with content, specifically with content, take 10 minutes to just go look at videos that you've looked at before. Which ones made you smile or, happy or whatever it is you're trying to convey, and just pull something from them. Still it. That's the whole point of stilling it like an artist. You still it, you tweak it, you turn it into something that's unique to you. So let's talk about some practical tips of doing this, leaning into authenticity. I mentioned a few last week. We'll talk about a few more this week. Like I was saying earlier, make a list of your influences, study them. Make a list of also unorthodox influences and study those. Make a list of recent influences and study those. And to study them, curate their work for the most powerful things that they've created that resonate most strongly with you. It doesn't have to be the most popular, just the stuff that makes you feel strongest, whatever it is. And then once you have that list of most powerful stuff, go and reference all of them and steal from them. That's not plagiarism. You're learning, you're curating for yourself in a deeper way. You can do that. That's totally fair game. Because if you do that, you have like a list of roadmaps on your computer that you can just pull from at any point in time. Definitely experiment with different styles. If you have a lot of influences from, like me, Motown, and then also a lot from dubstep, like, is there anything that they have in common? What can you learn from both of them if you combine them? It can literally be that unorthodox. Like, just go experiment. The more that you do that, the broader that your creative vision becomes, the more you're willing to pull techniques from different genres and put them into the genre that you're working with. Take bits and pieces and fragments and just see what you can do when you start collaging stuff together, and treat it like that. Treat it like a collage of your own taste as you're experimenting and learning this stuff about yourself. Collaborate. I mentioned this last time, but I'll mention it again. It's super valuable to collaborate with other people. Not only will you get feedback from them a lot of the time, but you'll start to see how other people are approaching the same problems that you're approaching, and they get a chance to learn from you, and that's valuable. Watch documentaries about the people that are on your favorites list. Try to learn more about their actual life. Try to understand, like, why did they make some of the decisions that they made? Not only what decisions were they making, but why were they making some of the decisions that they made? Because you may learn that one of your favorite artists has an influence that you've never heard of that is actually super dope to you. And now guess what? Now you have another influence to pull from. Now you're actually learning about the people that inspire you, and you can take that knowledge of their knowledge with you, which is kind of meta. Take note of the techniques and the methods that all of those, all of your inspirations use. And lastly, don't be afraid to ask for feedback from people. That is one of the quickest ways to learn what you're doing wrong, and also to learn what you're doing right. And I hope these tips make you feel like if you've been struggling creatively, you can move past that struggle. Let's take some time to connect everything together that we've talked about so far. So we talked about the difference between authenticity and originality. Authenticity is the desire to lean into your influences because it's the amalgamation of your tastes, and originality is the desire to rebel against those things because you don't want to pull something from somebody else. Pretty big difference if you really think about it that way. We talked about the power of referencing a lot of times in this series, but specifically in this episode we've talked about powerful technique of referencing, where you look at 3 different categories. You look at inspirations throughout your life, recent inspirations, and then unorthodox inspirations from totally different creative work, like cooking or TV shows. If you like reality TV shows, put every episode of Big Brother in there. We've talked about how using that specific technique and then taking it a step further to curate powerful work from each of those people on that list, or whatever on that list, how pulling that into a single sort of playlist for yourself, and then pulling specific things from each of them that you like the most. That is now your aesthetic. That is now your vibe. Now you've solved that problem, that unsolvable problem of defining your aesthetic. Whatever, it's solved. Don't worry about it anymore. Easy. We talked about how vibe is everything, aesthetic is everything as a creative. That technique lets you short circuit a lot of painful time spent just going like, I don't like anything that I'm making. As always, I mentioned the beauty of experimentation. As a creative, give yourself permission to be yourself in every aspect of what you do. The content that you make, the art that you make, the work that you do, the way you present it. Be yourself. Embrace yourself. The more that you do that, the more you're going to resonate with your work. The more you're going to want to work on your work. And the more that you do that, the more unique the stuff that you create is actually going to be. So if you want some resources on this kind of stuff, if you're just curious about this stuff, if this is the first video you're watching, there's a link in the description to sign up for the newsletter. You'll get a bunch of free resources about how to market yourself as a creative. And it's just stuff that I found that's been useful to me. And if you thought this video was dope, please leave a comment. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, share it with your homies, share it with your enemies if you're that kind of person. If you thought the video was way too fucking long, you're probably not even gonna see it. So that's it for this episode. Let's talk about what's in the next one. In the next one, it's gonna be all about storytelling. I mentioned this a couple episodes ago about storytelling, what is storytelling, kind of that it's a very powerful tool for you to convey emotion. I'll be breaking down some storytelling techniques that I find fascinating and really powerful as it relates to music production. So if that sounds interesting to you, be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you get notified when the video drops. Just as a quick reminder, there's only one more episode in the series about content, and that's going to be the storytelling episode, sort of wrap the story up, if you will. And then in the next series, we're going to be talking about business architecture, which is something that I think is very valuable knowledge, and I don't really hear a lot of people talking about it, or at least I haven't found them. And I think in a single person business model as a creative, you should understand what business architecture is at a very base level, because it's something that's going to help you, and it's something that I have a lot of experience helping big enterprises and different companies. So I'm applying knowledge that I've learned in my own previous career to this work and sharing it. So that's what the next series is going to be about. As a quick reminder, I do have a BeatStars page. So if you are interested in samples or beats or sound kits, presets, whatever, there's a link below so you can go check that stuff out. All right, catch y'all next time. Later.